Hi, this is Megha Joshi, the host of the Boardroom Zen podcast. This show is created for the ambitious business leaders. Are you someone wanting to play big? Want to possess a strong brand and executive presence that makes you belong in every room you walk into? And all of this without putting your personal life on hold? If the answer to those questions is yes, then you are in the right place. In this show, I sit down with best-in-class leaders to distill their wisdom while sharing what helped me stand out as a Fortune 100 executive. So let's get started. Our guest today is the Global Chief Communications Officer, most recently for Tenneco Incorporated. His career journey has seen him move from one side of the microphone to the other, and he's led communications and served as chief spokesperson for some of the world's leading companies, including State Farm, United Airlines, and Sears Holdings. He has a passion for mentoring and coaching, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's also a member of the Commission on Public Relations Education and the Paid Society. But he says his most important role is being a dad. Please join me in welcoming Chris Brathwaite to the show. Chris, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Meg. I appreciate it. I really do.
I have admired your career journey ever since the time we got introduced a few months ago. And it's so interesting to see your career path that has taken you from being a journalist and news reporter to becoming a chief communications officer for a Fortune 500 company. And I'm just so curious to learn more about the choices that led you to this point in your professional life. Would you be open to sharing a bit more on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. My career has been a series of choices. I had a teacher in high school who actually did a recommendation for me for college. And she referred to me, I'll never forget this, she referred to me as a diamond in the rough because she saw something in me that perhaps I didn't see in myself. And so being a native of Boston, Massachusetts, where sports is everything there, I was a huge sports fan. And I have a cousin actually in Chicago is a sportscaster for the ABC affiliate. So my goal going to college was to be a sportscaster. I did a number of internships, and eventually I did an internship at a leading station in central Illinois. And it's funny too, because I had a professor, we had to cover city council in Peoria, Illinois. I remember telling him, why am I doing this? I'm never going to cover city council. And my very first job out of college was as a government reporter for WJBC in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. And so when I was offered the opportunity after my internship, sitting with two people that I admire so much, including Steve Vogel, who I have on my professional Mount Rushmore, when they offered me the opportunity, I hadn't even graduated yet. I still had a semester to go. And the job was news. It was the government reporter for the station. And I had to first decide, did I want to live in central Illinois? Did I want to push aside this goal of being a sportscaster? And I think sometimes when you get these curveballs thrown at you, you have to think about, what can I take from this that's going to perhaps help me later in life? I didn't see it at first. Sure. As I've shared in our conversations previously, my very first assignment was covering the McLean County Fair. I'm from Boston. I had never been to a county fair. And so being given the task of having to come up with 7 feature stories at a county fair something I had never been at was quite a challenge. But I will say that saying yes to both Steve and Don Munson, who was the station president at the time, was the smartest thing I've ever done, because it set me on a path that has led me to being very blessed in my career and having some really amazing opportunities. Sure, I could have been a sportscaster somewhere, but I think I found that diamond in the rough. Once it was polished up, I think it really helped me understand who I could be as a professional, as a person.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. And by the way, I'd be scratching my head if I was supposed to report out 7 stories at a county fair. So kudos to you.
It's amazing when you're walking around, things just sort of happen, right? I did one story on a married couple that travel around the country as part of this fair. The oldest carny. I did one on something called a meadow muffin toss. Your audience can Google that. But these are things that I had never really experienced. But it was a great challenge. It was, I think, maybe the assistant news director's way of saying, let's find out what this kid's all about. I don't even know if I had graduated at that point. So I was thrown into the fray. And sometimes that's the best way to bring out the best in yourself.
Yeah. And with that path of being a news reporter, being at the front line to switching gears totally to being the chief spokesperson, that's an interesting transition for you. And so I'm just wondering how that came about after.
As a broadcaster, you make a decision at some point. And I think I've told other people this story. That same professor that had taken me to the city council meeting, he told a story in class about how he had sent audition tapes to every single major TV station in the country. And he hadn't heard back from any of them. And so that, coupled with the fact that working in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, where State Farm is headquartered, State Farm is the largest insurer of automobiles in the country and one of the largest insurance companies in the world. But they have this sort of mentality of keeping their head below the corn. It's like the biggest, worst kept secret in the world. And I think when you work in a community where there's a huge employer like that, there are opportunities that present themselves. And I did have an opportunity at State Farm, and it gave me a better work-life balance. It was certainly, again, pulling yourself out of something that felt comfortable. And because I loved what I did. I loved being celebrity, if you will, in the area.
Sure.
But State Farm gave me an opportunity to learn something new and take my skills to a new level. And that was another great opportunity. I mean, I did lobbying there. I was on the front line of hurricanes. And I say I've been very blessed to work for some great companies, but also work for and with some really great people. I've had opportunities to lead communications or be a part of teams that managed unimaginable crises like 9/11, the pandemic, bankruptcies, the purchase of a company by a private equity firm. And if you set aside the personal emotional toll of some of those things, as a communications professional, for most of us, that's like our Super Bowl. That's when we really have a chance to show our true value to an organization. Because when things look the worst, that's when everybody turns to us and says, what are we going to say? Every day you can go on social media or read a newspaper or go on TV and find companies that find themselves thrust into those situations. Southwest over the holidays and their great communications team that managed through that. I'm sure that books that'll be written in years past, in years in the future, that will talk about some of those crises. But it's really an opportunity. I say when something changes in your career or changes in your life, there's a paradigm shift. There's a chance, what I say, to grow and show, to grow from the experience as a person, as a professional, but also to show your value. And I think that's one of the things. You don't have to be in communications, regardless of your place in a company. When change is thrown at you or things look difficult, it's really an opportunity for you to really show what you're all about.
Yeah, and that's when the heat's on and you got to make things happen. And I see this common thread in your career trajectory of embracing change. I mean, looking at your career, you worked for leading brands, including United Airlines, which is travel, State Farms, which is insurance, Sears Holdings, retail, and many more, and then Tenneco, which is automobile, if I am not incorrect.
Right.
So how did you navigate so many different industries? Because that requires someone to have a very different mindset, a very resilient mindset where you embrace this change and not let that get to you. So talk to me more about it.
Again, going back to what I said a little bit earlier, I think when you have an opportunity to learn something new, and I think in my life, I always want to learn. I have a continuous improvement mindset. You want to find ways to be better tomorrow than you were today. And so looking at my resume, which is all these companies, the way I look at it is if you're a first responder, let's say you're a first responder in Chicago and your family moves to Phoenix, Arizona, you can be a first responder there. The fact that you had been in company A, let's say you work for a consumer product goods company, doesn't mean you couldn't work for an oil and gas company, right?
Yeah.
Communications, just like teaching, there's certain tenets of that practice, of that science that transcends industries. And I do see sometimes in some companies, they do have a bias toward people that have worked in a particular industry all along. But I think a little myopic because I think you can learn. I think what I brought to these companies was a new, fresh perspective because I wasn't only insurance or only airline or only retail. So I think for people in general, I think embrace those type of things. And preparation, right? Preparation is so key in everything we do. And I can tell you a little story. Recently, I was with my family in Nantucket, and I got absolutely destroyed by a huge wave. And it's really because, and most of the time, you're looking at the water and you're jumping over waves or you're diving into them so you don't get bundled.
Right.
And I took my eyes off the wave. And my shoulder was bleeding, and it was because
Oh my God.
I wasn't prepared. I didn't keep my eyes on the potential threat, so to speak. And I think that's maybe a hyperbolic example, but I think that the truth is that you can handle literally anything that comes in your way with preparation.
Yeah.
These are things that I talk to my son about, as he sometimes has anxiety about everything that's on his plate. And we talk about that. But we talk about the fact that if you prepare, you don't have to stress when the time comes. Every great
Yes.
company that has managed through a crisis, even 9/11 at United. A lot of people don't know this, but shortly before 9/11, we'd actually done a tabletop exercise around a similar crisis. So we couldn't have imagined that it was ever going to come true. But the fact that we'd gone through that and had really robust crisis plans, when the day came, obviously there was this unbelievable emotional toll of what was happening to the country.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
we were all able to then flip the switch and just roll up our sleeves and get to work. And so preparation is absolute key for a lot of things.
Beautiful. And I love those takeaways, especially a lot of us leaders are living in this sense of urgency to declare our specialty or our industry, that we close ourselves to new possibilities, right? We can always draw on some common skills or transferable skills that we can take from one area to the other. And so being open, I think, to embracing new possibilities is powerful. And as you said so beautifully, that we discount preparation, and there's nothing that good preparation cannot overcome. So that makes so much sense and explains your success in this interesting trajectory across industries.
Right.
And I also heard this intriguing story from you where in the past you had the chance to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts for a Fortune 500 company. And this was a really powerful position and great opportunity, but you decided to pass up on this opportunity. So tell me more about what was going on and your reasons for that decision.
Sure. So I was approached by my then boss, the CEO, and our head of HR. This was a time when the company was starting up its DE&I practice. And they asked me, would I be interested in leading it? They saw something in me, again, as a leader, as a professional, an opportunity for me to take this over. And listen, these matters of DE&I, it's part of my DNA. I'm a descendant of a member of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the regiment that was made famous in the movie Glory. And so this is part of who I am, embracing people's differences, learning from people, and helping educate people about the strengths that we can glean from each other, regardless of whether we look the same. But in this particular case, I felt like I still had more to do in my practice in what I was building at the organization. So I talked to them about how can I do both? How can I be really involved in standing up this practice, the DE&I initiatives, but also continue to build what I was building in the communications function? And that's what ended up happening. I was on the board, on the DE&I board for the company. I was the executive sponsor for the African American Network, and also the executive sponsor for one of the regional boards. I was the only one at the company that had all three of those opportunities. So I was heavily involved in being a voice for change at the company, while at the same time continuing to build what I was building in the global communications function.
That's very interesting because it's super hard to say no to this golden opportunity that just drops in someone's lap, and you necessarily didn't say no to it. You, in a way, still helped drive those initiatives because you were passionate about it.
Right.
And while you were continuing to build your positioning in the communication space, and that requires a lot of clarity about what someone is not just good at, but great at. And that's such an interesting awareness for anyone to have, Chris.
I think it was good for me because obviously it allowed me to do both and to provide extra value, because that's, as a communication, everybody, regardless of what you do, you want to show value to the people that sign your paychecks, right? And
Totally.
I think it was good for the company too, because we ended up hiring somebody that I interviewed and recommended who I think is absolutely great for the company. And so I think it was a win. I will always be flattered and have an affinity for the gentleman that approached me and their reasoning behind it. And I think they respected and understood where I was coming from too, where we can get Chris really involved in this as a leader at the company and also find someone to take this practice to the next level as well.
Yeah, and makes so much sense. And so let's fast forward to where you are in your career in knowing what you know now. If you were to ever bump into your younger self in a dream or on a different plane, what advice would you give to them?
Well, first, I would probably laugh at myself for the many fashion faux pas I committed back in those days. I don't look anything like I did. I actually have the picture still that hung in the station. Everybody had a big picture, a big headshot. I still have it there.
So one day I want to see that picture for sure.
Yeah.
And I promise I will not share that publicly or put that on LinkedIn.
I keep that thing under lock and key. But I think I would tell myself, because you remember going back to, I remember leaving, I probably acted not in front of the people who I work for, but when I went to the station vehicle to go to the McLean County Fair, I'm sure I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like a brat, like when I tell my son to clean his room. I probably would tell myself, listen, there are going to be some difficult times. I had no family in Illinois. When I left Boston, packed up my car and drove here, could start work. My very first day of work was New Year's Eve, actually. I didn't know anybody in Illinois. I had just a couple of people that I lived with, no real friends. There are going to be some difficult times. You're working 6 days a week. And I would tell myself, listen, there are going to be some difficult times. However, just trust in yourself and continue to have a good work ethic, and you will be very blessed. You just have to stay positive. I mean, that's what I've done.
Beautiful. And that's so profound. And that's the thing that we many times forget to tell ourselves, is to have belief in what we have to offer the world. The gifts that we have are unique and special, and no one else has the same gifts that any individual has.
That's right.
And somehow in this world, we are very much driven by the external factors that make us look great, whether it's the net worth or other external validating factors, and we forget our own self-worth. And I often say that to my clients that I coach, is that our self-worth actually drives our net worth. They're so connected. True. And so your piece of advice of trusting oneself, it's so on point.
One of the things that I also hold myself to, and I've actually used this when I've given referrals for people, is that you can teach people a lot of things. The one thing you can't teach them is work ethic. My mother is my professional North Star, and getting a little emotional because I'm thinking about the difficult years she's had. But I remember as a kid in the mornings, her kicking my door open, Christian, wake up. I can't find my keys. And the fact that she was so worried about not being at work on time had a profound impact on me. And so yes. I think that her just driving so hard to provide for the family. When I was in college, my mom lost her job. And so she took a part-time job at a dry cleaner in our town to try to make ends meet while she looked for another full-time job. These are things that have an impact on you as a professional. And you never want to let those people down. You never want to put yourself in a position where you're not able to look yourself in the mirror and say, the people that paved the way, that I haven't done everything I can do to hold up what they've built.
Yeah, in no wonder, Chris, you are the diamond in the rough, especially learning more about the humble beginnings and the struggles you've had in your early years to reaching the top positions in corporate America. That is so inspiring for anyone, let alone myself.
Appreciate
And the last question, Chris, I have for you is, over these years, I'm sure you've read a lot of books. So is there any particular must-read book that you believe every leader should be exploring or reading?
Absolutely. The first thing I would say for every leader is, before you pick up a book, find a way to relax. These jobs are so incredibly stressful. All jobs. Meditate. Find a hobby. Everyone's playing pickleball. I might be the only one who doesn't play pickleball in the world, I guess. Find some way to relax, because I think if you don't find ways to allow your brain to relax and to just exhale a little bit, you're going to carry that on through all parts of your life. And I think that's so key. But getting back to your question, the one book that's had a significant impact on me, and I actually referenced this book earlier this week to my son, is The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Spoiler alert, but the basic gist of the book is that we all try to do the 30 things on our plate at the same time. And so the book really teaches you that to finish a project with excellence and then move to the next is better than having 30 things halfway done.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you prioritize, obviously. You're not going to leave the CEO letter to employees just sitting there waiting while he or she is like, hey, where's my letter, man? But I do think that we often try to take on so much that it's very difficult. My son, he had to head down to college to unpack his apartment and move stuff. And he was real quiet. I'm like, what's going on? He said, I don't know. I got a lot on my plate. And I said, listen, man, you just compartmentalize it. And I promise you it'll all get done. And you'll look back and say, what was I so worried about? So that's a book that I would if people haven't read it, it's relatively short, but it does help companies and professionals and leaders remind themselves that you have 10 things. If you look at your a week of meetings, all the things are blocked out. You barely have time for lunch. You've got to prioritize and then try to knock things out. And I'll tell you this, I learned this 20 plus years ago. I heard it from a CEO was speaking at an event when I worked at State Farm. And she said that the thing that she did every day was to start her day with an accomplishment. And that was making her bed. I knew I started my day with an accomplishment and I could just go from there. So every day I start my day with an accomplishment. Whether I'm on vacation, wherever I am, I do that because you just beginning this process of success for your day, right?
Yeah.
I cannot remember. I literally cannot remember the last time I came home. My bed was, I don't know. I can't, honestly, if you ask me, I couldn't tell you. But I think it's the little things, right? It doesn't have to be huge, significant, seismic changes, but reminding yourself that we cannot do, one of my former bosses says, there's nothing we can't do everything. And so we have to remind ourselves that it's really critical. Get the project done, get one done, move to the next.
Yeah.
You'll feel that you and your people who work for you will feel a sense of accomplishment and they'll take that wave to the next thing, right? You can't jump up Mount Everest.
Totally.
It takes a bunch
Totally. And that's a great reminder. As you said, it's about making those choices and not trying to spread ourselves thin because that doesn't serve anyone, let alone us. And I love the power of slowing down, whether it's before walking into a big board meeting or handling a media situation, which I'm sure in your career you've done many times. And I can relate to the pressure that you spoke about from my own experience, Chris. I used to run corporate escalations for a Fortune 100 company, which means any of the 30 million customers that are super unhappy, they go to media agencies or they go to government agencies or they called our CEO. All those would trickle down to my team and I would get phone calls from our media team or the executive suite while I could be on the beach enjoying my vacation. And I'd have to drop everything because there is something brewing and I need to be there to protect the organization and while also standing up for the customers that we have. And so in those intense high pressure moments, it's really about calming down and finding your sweet spot so you can stay present and you can still deliver and operate.
That's right.
Right?
It's people sometimes forget the importance of breathing. Tiger Woods one time said that the difference between him and some of the people that he played against, after they tee off and they're walking to their ball, he would literally find ways to slow his breathing down. Because if you're out of breath when you get to the ball because you're nervous and everything else, it impacts everything in the swing. And so walking into that boardroom to present your new plan, there's nerves, which is okay. There should be some general nerves, but maintaining your breathing is so critical because it affects everything. It really does.
Totally.
You ever try to walk upstairs fast and you're talking to somebody on the phone and you're like, hold on a second, I just got to catch me.
Exactly. You just cannot be present in that conversation.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think more leaders need to hear this, pausing, breathing. And there's this huge power in just simple breathing that changes how we're thinking and it drives these chemical reactions in our body to stay present. So I can totally relate to that and speak on this topic for days.
That's right.
And Chris, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. You are just full of these wisdom nuggets. I wish we had more time, but maybe another time we'll have you come back and share the 2.0 version of your life. There's just so much to unpack.
I will. I'll bring that picture too. Maybe I'll just hold it up.
Yes, you recorded here, so it better happen.
Okay. Thank you so much, Meg. I appreciate it. It was lovely.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is no better time than now to stop playing small and tap into your zone of genius. With a Boardroom Zen executive coach by your side, experience the game-changing transformation, both internally and externally. Find out more on boardroomzen.com. And thank you for listening to my show. It means so much to me. I'd love for you to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite listening platform. More power to you, and hope to see you soon.